Brilliant. Thanks a million, Mark, for the invite to talk about hybrid learning. It's one of my passions, one of the things that we've ended up doing quite a bit of, having students in the class, having students at home, how we deal with that in a lot of practical aspects. So just a little bit about me. I work in an all-girls Islamic faith school. So last year, I was second in the department in maths. So this year, I'm deputy director of learning in charge of PE, which is head of PE for this year. So a little bit of a change. And as Mark is, I'm also a Microsoft Innovative Educator expert for this year on the back of things that we were doing throughout the lockdown. For me, hybrid learning is very much the scenario that a lot of schools are facing at the moment, where we don't have whole bubbles out. We've small bubbles out. We've some students who are in school, some students are at home, and it's how we deal with that in the most effective way to ensure that learning continues for those at home, learning continues for those in school, but we're not, really killing students with screen time that Zoom and Teams fatigue that can happen. So we were very lucky in the fact that we actually got our remote learning offer right from the start. Right from March, we started doing live lessons with year 10, and then we expanded from there. And hybrid learning, and I put a question mark in because this we don't know where the end is with this in sight. This quote, it sums up everything that I personally kind of do. It's do the best until you can do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. So as we do this journey through going from remote learning into remote teaching, where we're now in the classroom, or to hybrid learning, all we can do is do what we can do until we come to sessions like this or learn from other schools. And that sharing is huge in terms of how we share what are the best bits that are happening in our schools. So I have 7 kind of top tips for hybrid learning that I'll get through. The first one, I'm a fan of Doug Lemov and his Teach Like a Champion strategies, but very much everything is based on practice. So everything that he does. Apologies, my internet connection just dropped there. Sorry about that. So let me get on to. So I'm looking at the 7 top tips. So let me reshare my slides. Apologies. Not quite sure how much of that we got, but in terms of practice, I'm a fan of Doug Lemov and Teach Like a Champion strategies, and it's something that we use hugely in school, and it's embedded on practice. And I know we've already been in the situation where we've had to deliver hybrid lessons, or schools might be looking towards starting to deliver these hybrid lessons. And my advice, use your colleagues and let them do their worst. We've got practice meetings. We also have teams called sandboxes where people can just go and play. And I think this should be probably a monthly thing. There's so many new innovations being launched by Microsoft and other platforms all the time. Put time into a calendar where staff come together, collaborate, and see what can go wrong, what can go really, really right, and share the best practice. Testing out the routines and the technology for anything new that you're doing, kind of a pre-mortem before you introduce something. Get a group of colleagues together, have a go, see what goes right, see what goes wrong. What are the pitfalls? What are the advantages? Are we doing it just for the sake of doing it, or are we doing it to make a difference? The second thing for me is the most important buttons that I find. The record button. I record the instructional aspect and share it as soon as possible. With Teams, if you record this in the first 5 minutes of the lesson, it will pop into the chat within a couple of minutes, which means then that your focus then can be on the students in the classroom. If the students are at home or struggling, your first answer is, right, have you gone back and looked at the video? The video's in the chat, go and have a watch. And then if you have a question after that, put the question in the chat. It also means that without actually trying, you're creating this fantastic bank of revision and resources that students can use again and again and again. You can set these as tasks on Teams that you can have to go in and watch the video, put a form with it, edit it and stream. The second thing is about the mute button. Do students need to hear everything that's going on in the classroom? Now, I had the privilege of being at home for 2 weeks because of track and trace. and I was teaching from home, and I found it very distracting. And I, as an adult, found it distracting when I could hear the students in the classroom. So with the supply teacher, we were turning on and off the microphone as needed. So yes, they were controlling the classroom behaviour, but that then also goes for students who are at home. If students at home, are they getting distracted by that noise in the classroom? So that mute button is really, really important to use. The third tip that I would give is about routine and expectations. And this was something that we set out very, very early on about what's our first 5 minutes of lesson look like? What's our last 5 minutes of lesson look like? And I know this is going to be touched on later in terms of what it looks like at your school. For me, you'll already have a classroom routine. What does this look like for a physical and a digital classroom? And it's been very granular and specific as using the resources that you have to create this routine. I'll show an example in a second of what I did. This was me at home. So you can see I've got my iPad where I'm writing my material. I have my second screen, which is always useful. It's one of the most useful tools when you're teaching online. And my students are there and they've got their planners. So that's how I color coded. This is solving equations with unknowns on both sides with year 8. I color coded which part, and they're able to give me feedback straight away. And in the chat, I've got students who are at home and they're able to give me their color straight away. So I'm getting that feedback straight away from my students and getting good feedback. The other tip of this part is also sharing the starter in the chat function. It buys you a little bit of time. So our routine in school is that we're all in bubbles, so we're moving classrooms, which is difficult. I come into the classroom, the students have to say a prayer in Arabic and in English. While they're doing that, I'm setting up. I put my starter very quickly into the chat function. I settle the class, get the title, the learning objective, and their starter shared on the board. And then I move into starting my live meeting, and I can start then looking at both my classrooms. These ones come from these are more from a pedagogical point of view. We're using Teach Like a Champion strategies, and we have to remember we're still teaching. And one of the things that I've said, and it was quite funny because one of our senior directors with the trust I work with said the exact same thing. Great teaching is great teaching no matter what the platform. And one of these things is about narrating the positive and encouraging that positive behaviour both in a digital classroom and in a physical classroom. So naming and acknowledge students and trying to have that balance between those in the classroom and those at home can be quite difficult. I know one staff member fed back to me and said the poor student at home was getting all the questions. But it's making sure that we have a balance in both. And normalising that active engagement so when we have a lesson that's going on where we've got 2 classrooms effectively, making sure that we narrate that positive and saying well done and acknowledging the effort from students, because it's very, very easy, especially when you get to kind of period 5 or period 6 of a day, when you've been on the computer all day, to not engage as much. So it's normalising that active engagement and saying well done and making sure that you're pointing out the positive behaviour and why. Show me and show call, which I love. Establishing early on, how are you seeing the work that students doing? Show me can be used in classroom very, very easily. So in the classroom, you can get the students, right, hold up your book, let me see what you've done. At home, don't make it complicated. You don't have to ask them to post in the chat. Right, you've got your cameras on. Right, can you pick up the work you're doing and show me? And it can be as simple as that. We can use technology in great ways, but then sometimes just doing really simple things are actually really effective. Show call takes the best of show me and then take the best of student work and share it. With the fact that we have students at home, with the fact that we're using technology for students to submit assignments, it's never been easier to actually share the best practices. And that gives students great encouragement and showing them actually this is the standard that we want to see. Pause points. They're short, interactive moments. That you do these in loads of different ways. And one of the ways that you could do it when it's remote, it's nice and easy. You can put a form into the chat. You can put a poll into the chat. One of the ideas that I would have for using it within a digital and a physical classroom is plickers, which I'm going to share in a second. There's 4 kind of purposes with these pause points. So it gives that cognitive engagement. Again, if we don't have those pause points, especially coming towards ends of lessons, students can disengage very easily. It gives students a chance to allow formative thinking. enables us to check for understanding, and it gives that opportunity to consolidate the learning so that the students are retrieving. This is an image from Plickers. So Plickers is a free app that you can use. So the students, you print off a card for every student. It's multiple choice. It's A, B, C, D. So you create your question, but it means you can replicate what's happening with a form that you type into the chat for the students at home in school. You have your phone, you quickly scan the room, and you get all the results on your computer. Nice, quick, and easy, but it gives you that. It's the same information from students at home and in school. Strategic cold calling, just because they're at home doesn't mean you stop calling on them. Cold calling them, it holds them accountable. It makes sure that they're still engaged. We all know that when we're on meetings, it's very easy to go and look at something or be not paying full attention. Whereas if students know that no matter if they're in the classroom or if they're in school, that cold calling is happening, makes a huge difference. It's also quite nice, especially if students are off for quite a period of time. My students love hearing the students at home give answers. And there's always silence, complete silence when a student from home is giving an answer, which is really, really nice because they appreciate that kind of relationship and having that social aspect where they're still hearing the people in class or people at home. And they're my kind of 7 tips. I know I kind of rushed through them, but I've just stuck my Twitter handle, and I will forward these to Mark. But one of the things that I've worked on with our school is these one-pagers for different topics within Microsoft Teams. So any comments or feedback, that's my Twitter handle. Thank you very much, Mark.
Elaine, thank you so much for that. That is brilliant. I know that you've done loads of work on hybrid learning, and as I said earlier, it's one of those areas that I think we all struggle with. So I'm just wondering, I'm sure there are questions that are going to come in. I've had one question straight away, which was what was the app called? I think it's Plickers you were talking about.
Yeah, Plickers, it was the app for that one. I think when I have some staff who say, actually, I'm tech phobic. I don't like tech. I don't like remote teaching. For them, when back in March was like, oh my God, this is so far out of my comfort zone. But one of the things that I do say, it's kind of like starting your PGCE again a little bit, in the fact that your pace is going to be a lot slower. And we've got to accept that if we're trying this whole new model of teaching, we've got to accept that our pace is going to be slower. But it goes back to that quote from Maya Angelou, as you do it, the more you do it, the better practice, the more perfect practice, which my students are sick of me saying, because I'm a real stickler for perfect practice as just not just token practice. But the more we do it, the better we get. And I found that in a couple of weeks, the pace of my lessons is nearly back to normal, which I wouldn't have said at the very, very start of this.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Elaine. We haven't had any other questions in at the moment. I'm anticipating there will be. The live feed is always a few minutes behind us, so that may be why. But if you wouldn't mind, if I could pass on some questions to you a bit later on, if they come through.
Yeah, no problem. I'll hang around and I can answer a few anyway.